Welcome back, it's me Lou, and I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review. Today I'm bringing you this special double feature, and we are looking at two different versions of Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu. So, with the new movie coming out soon, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, this figure has been popping up on store shelves. This is a six-figure wave that includes Shang-Chi, can't read this, Wenwu, Xialing, Death Dealer, Civil Warrior, and the AI Tony Stark. You collect all the figures for each different Build-A-Figure piece, and you can create Mr. Hyde. So yeah, this is the hot new Marvel Legends series line that's currently out. And the second figure we're going to review is, this is a much older figure. I think this came out maybe last year or 2 years ago. This is the Shang-Chi. This is the comic book inspired design. So yeah, we're going to take a look at them both. So first off, let's do the movie one first. Okay, so here we have, it comes in your standard Marvel Legends packaging. Yeah, the title logo here for the new film, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. As usual, we have the figure framed within the window and the accessories, and you can see the Mr. Hyde Build-A-Figure piece. The figure comes with additional pairs of hands. Comes with, it looks like a bow staff. On the spine, we have some nice character artwork. And here we go again. Nice artwork of the actor Simu Liu, who plays Shang-Chi. And let's read the bio. Trained since childhood by the mysterious Ten Rings organization, Shang-Chi must confront the past he thought he left behind when he is drawn back into his father's web. Cool. So. Alright, so first impressions while the figure's still in the box. It looks cool. I haven't seen the movie yet, and I'm not sure, how faithful it is to the comic book version of the character. Now, this character design, it doesn't scream superhero like, say, as a character like Spider-Man, where they're kind of wearing a mask and something that looks more like a costume. The uniform he's wearing here looks very detailed, and this looks really cool. So I'm excited to check this out. Right now I can tell you this, I really appreciate the face sculpting. It really captures Simu Liu's likeness. Alright, so I'm trying to open this up right now. I'm feeling a little, I don't know, woozy. It's been one of those days. Okay, alright. Alright, so impressions right out of the box. It's looking good. I'm loving the proportions of the figure. The details, especially on his uniform, is just amazing. Some really crisp texture. I love the pinstriping and the designs. There's some really fine paintwork going on in here. I love getting the additional hands. Sometimes I think it's a little bit overboard, because if you collect Marvel Legends figures for so long, you amass this giant collection of spare accessories and parts, including hands. So I have like this container where it's just filled with so many different hands from all the different characters. But they come in handy. You can always, depending on the figures and what size the pegs are, you can swap hands between different figures. Use the different hands for customs. I mean, it's great. Alright, so for now, I'm going to leave the hands in here. I might swap them out later, but, if you're watching this video, chances are you've handled, hundreds of these kind of figures, so you know the deal. You just pull the hands out and swap them back in. The bow staff doesn't look like anything too spectacular either, so unless you can't use your imagination to imagine me putting it in there, I'm just going to leave it in here for now. I'm more about just looking at the figure. Okay, so here we have Shang-Chi, played by actor Simu Liu, and it looks nice. I'm looking, my first thought is, wow, this guy has some really nice hair. You know, whoever does his hair every morning, it looks great. I used to comb my hair like this at one time, but I don't know, on and off I'll grow my hair out, and I don't know, the goal right now is to grow my hair back to mid-back. So, okay, enough about that. Some great movement with the head. Yeah, I can look down. Wow, that's great. The arms are what you expect. Does, you know, raise up. No butterfly joint. I'm very surprised. It seems like lately a lot of Marvel Legends figures, they have the butterfly joint. And I'm not a big fan of the butterfly joint, mostly because the black costume Spider-Man, that was a figure that gave me problems. I had to buy that figure 2 or 3 times. The first 2 times I bought the figure, the butterfly joint was like stuck, and I wouldn't know it until it broke. You know, I'd keep on moving it thinking it was fine. But what would happen is that it's made of a softer, almost rubbery plastic, and it was pinched inside of the, when they closed the 2 halves of the torso, the peg got pinched in, and it just wouldn't move, but you wouldn't know it when you're moving it. Because since it's not a harder plastic, it doesn't have that kind of like, that feel. You know, if you move a harder plastic, you know it's moving. Sometimes with the softer rubbery plastics, you don't really know what's going on. It doesn't really give a definite maybe like click or response to your movement. And I don't know. So for that, the butterfly joints just kept on breaking. And it's one of those things that ever since, you know, I bought that figure 3 times, and twice in a row, you know, I had the same issue. So every time I got a figure with a butterfly joint, it just kind of like, I'm always kind of like leery on it. But I'm just kind of surprised for a figure like Shang-Chi that they didn't give him a butterfly joint, just because, you know, in the comic books he's touted as the master of kung fu, and you know, you can't thrust his arms back, and it seems like it just limits his poses. He still shares the same amount of articulation as, you know, standard Marvel Legends, but just minus the butterfly joint. Which, in some ways, I'm glad, because I hate the butterfly joint, but in some ways, kind of disappoints me, because it kind of hinders his movement. And especially if you're big on posing your figures or action figure photography, you're not going to get those really dynamic gestures and action poses and fight scenes that you're going to want. But yeah, it's a great looking figure. As I've mentioned at the beginning of the video, like, as detailed and as great as this looks, when I look at this, I don't necessarily think like a costume. I think more of like a uniform. Like Spider-Man, like something like this is a costume. You see something like this, it's a superhero. But in the comic books, Shang-Chi, you know, he was never one to wear something that looks more like a superhero. You know, he's always wearing his standard martial arts kind of garb. And speaking of butterfly joints, this is a figure that I was talking about. So if you're not familiar with the term butterfly joint, it's this right here. So most figures, they have this, you know, you can move the arms up, and you can rotate them up and down, and they might have a swivel where you go off to the side. So for a butterfly joint, it's actually a separate piece that's in the upper half of the torso, like this. And it allows you to not only, so you have standard arm movement where you can rotate round. You can go on the shoulder, like go up like this. But because with this butterfly joint, you could twist, you could pull your arm in, or you could pull your arm back. So when I was saying especially with a martial arts character, it'd seem much more to its benefit if it had the butterfly joint, because then you'd be able to allow him to do some really cool poses where his arm could go fully back, or he could bring his arms in. Like in the case of the Spidey, you know, he could bring his arms in, he could touch his hands. Whereas on this, I'm not sure if you could necessarily do that without bending up, you know, at the elbow. So you can see the advantages of having a butterfly joint. For me, I'm always fearful of this joint because, like I said, I've had multiple cases across the line for Marvel Legends where this joint feels like it's moving, but it's actually the peg's actually stuck, and every time I move it, what I'm actually doing is tearing the plastic, and I won't know it until this eventually just falls out. So, but every now and then you get a figure where you can feel it moving freely and it's doing what it's supposed to do, and if there's a gap big enough, you can actually even peek underneath and see the peg moving in the slot. So he has an ab crunch too, and you go all the way. And same with the back, you know, you can like pretend he's doing flips. As cool as his uniform is, this thing here kind of hinders his outward kick, so he can't super kick as high, which again is kind of unfortunate because, you know, Shang-Chi is the master of Kung Fu, and it looks like he can't kick as high as he should. I like his shoes a lot. So yeah, it's a decent figure. I think what hurts it, it's like I said, I haven't seen the movie yet, so I don't know how wild he gets in terms of the fight sequences, but in terms of if you're a kid, I think you're always going to lean to something that seems more, lean on the more of a superhero, like this dude. Or, you know, it's more of a costume character. It seems more like something you'd see in a cartoon. This looks very true to like what you can see on the big screen, but I don't know. He's just missing some flash. You know what I mean? It's like nothing against the guys or gals who designed his costume, but I get kind of tired when I see like superhero costumes look more grounded in the real world rather than, you know, being what they are. You know, so I like my superheroes to like look like superheroes. I hate it when they take. Like, Captain America is a good example. Cap's comic book costume is very, very comic book-like. You know, it's covered in chainmail. He has a cowl on the top of his head. Very bright, very colorful. But then when you start getting stuff into the movies, you know, the way they express his costume becomes more of like what I'd say like a uniform. There's more straps, more buckles. You know, they give him like tactical armor. And sometimes it just feels... I don't know. I don't think we should be embarrassed of the source material. You know, if characters wear stuff that looks like spandex, give them spandex. You know, Shang-Chi, the one I was exposed to when I was a kid, he looked like a martial artist. And we'll get to that in a little bit too. So, all right, so we'll put this figure aside. If I had to rate him numerically, probably a 7. Mostly because I think for what this character is and what he represents, and, you know, the master of Kung Fu, I expect him to be nuts and be super articulated. And even though he does have all the articulation that he should have for a Marvel Legends figure, the fact that he can't get in those really crazy expressive poses like you know, like the Spider-Man can. You see, Spider-Man's getting nuts. He can kick super high. This guy can can't even, you know, barely kick above his waist. But the one thing that does save it for me is that the sculpting and the detail is beautiful. The actor's likeness is spot on. He has really beautiful, well-groomed hair. And the paint, at least on mine, is great. Some really fine line work. But as a display piece, it's awesome. Playability-wise, it's fair. It's not the most spectacular thing in the world. And to be honest, when I was at the store, I was contemplating picking up some of the other Shang-Chi toys. Like, they have the ones that are clearly aimed for kids. Like, I think there was a single pack or a double pack, but they're not even like they're on cards, but they're like open aired, if you know what I'm talking about. And the toy's more about a play feature. Like, it'll be almost like statically posed with certain things that can move. And maybe I think it's one of those figures where he squeezes the legs and maybe his arm will spin around. And for me, those look pretty cool because those look like fun to play with. But it's the same character design, but I don't know, I might give that a shot. I might pick up one of the more budget figures from this movie line, and we'll see how they fare. But for now, this figure, you know, I hate to say it, it's this kind of average. what really hurts it, I think, is the articulation. I just wish it could do more than what it does. Sculpting wise and paint wise, it's perfect. You know, it's a really beautiful figure, but just in terms of the play, you know, being able to play with it and or even do figure photography with it, you're not going to be super limited, but I think it's going to fall a little bit shorter than your expectations for what a figure and character like this should do. So yeah, it's a nice figure. I don't want to sound like I'm being negative on it, just because I've handled the comic book inspired Shang-Chi before, and that figure is a little bit of a different story, and we'll take a look at that now. Okay, so here is the comic book based Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. As we spoke of earlier, you know, the traditional Marvel Legends style packaging. We have his character logo right here. Some beautiful artwork. I'm not 100% sure, but I think artist David Nakayama does this. I think. If I remember his name correctly, I think that's who does this. And here we have a very exciting pose. He's coming out of the fires, you know. Shang-Chi is a master of martial arts and a warrior for justice. Alright. And here are the other figures in his wave. And you could build Demo Goblin right here. I think that's some sort of variation of Hobgoblin. Never read the comic with Demo Goblin in it. So yeah, this looks cool. As I mentioned before, I have handled this figure once before. I had one of these guys, and I modified them and made a custom G.I. Joe classified quick kick. And I might do a review on those somewhere down the road. My custom G.I. Joe figs. Now let me get this open. Okay, if you want to talk about extra hands, this guy has them all. It's nuts. I remember the first time I bought this, I'm like, I can't believe how many hands this guy comes with. It's like, they give you every hand for every possible scenario. He has all sorts of, like, claws, grips, you know, clasping, you know, the flat hand. They give him two different kind of nunchucks. They give you the straight and they give you the bent one. And he even comes with Demo Goblin's torso. So on accessories alone, I paid the same price for this guy as this guy. And this guy came with more hands, came with cooler weapons, and even his builder figure piece is even cool. Alright, so I'm just going to take the figure out. As I've said before, chances are, you know, most of you that are watching this video are already familiar with these figures. And this is an older figure too, so there's more than enough video reviews out there. Alright, so we have Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu, and this is inspired more so off the comic book version of the character. And I gotta tell you, I love this figure. Everything about it, for me, is just perfect. The proportions are great. The sculpting, you know, he's super ripped. They gave him the butterfly joints. His range of motion is awesome. So, yeah, I mean, look at that. That is this. Yeah, right now I'm just moving his butterfly joint with a little bit of hesitancy because I'm just trying to feel it out. I'm like, is this joint stuck? Like, I have bad luck with action figures. In all honesty, probably like 1 out of every 3 to 4 action figures I get, there's some sort of weird manufacturing defect. Stuck joints is always a big one. I don't really count, you know, bad paint application because I don't know, I can easily overlook that, but anything that involves joints or something that's miscasted, you name it, I've seen them all. And I've seen almost every remedy to like fix everything, so So right away, right off the bat, in terms of articulation, this guy does everything that I wanted this one to do. Um, I mean, he looks awesome. It's like you watch a movie like Enter the Dragon, and you could probably put him in every Bruce Lee pose. But he suffers from the problem that with a lot of Marvel Legends. A lot of them can't kick that high to the side. So this is where this, I think this one, this one actually kicks a little bit higher. So as much as I love this, he doesn't kick as far out as he should. And kicking high, yeah, I mean, Marvel Legends figures, with the exception of some Spider-Man figure, they don't kick as high as they could or should, especially since it's the Master of Kung Fu. But I love the sculpting on this one. The proportions are great. I love the different hands, especially you could do all sorts of awesome things. Yeah, so for me, it's kind of, this is where the disappointment comes in. I kind of wish this one had the flair of this one. You know, this guy has it, but I think it's kind of almost unfair to say that, because if this is really true to how the character looks like in the movie, I got to hold it to that standard. This guy's on a different level just because it's based off of a much more looser fiction, and he's been depicted dozens of different times by different artists. So they could they could create some embellishments, like he has this crazy long headband and it's it's waving in the wind, and it's just awesome. The folds here are exaggerated and more stylized than how it would look in real life. Whereas this guy, this is probably what his costume looks exactly as it does in the movie. And if that's the case, cool. One thing I kind of miss that action figures used to do, and maybe not so much as they do now, is so in the late 90s, early 2000s, action figures, especially the ones made by like McFarlane Toys, they're almost more like small statues than toys. So articulation would always be kind of limited, and they almost seemed like they were sculpted to be statues, and then if they'd break them up later and give them the articulation, if that makes any sense. But even though they had articulation, it was almost pointless because, for example, back in the 90s or early 2000s, you might have a figure where you'd get it and it'd be posed. It'd be kind of like pre-posed. So it'd be like this. All right, so let's say this was the character's pose. And it was almost like a statue. But the thing is, it almost seemed like the articulation was an afterthought. So they'd cut at the crotch and leg and at the arms, and you could move it. And even though you can move it, the leg would still be caught frozen in time in that one pose. So it really made no sense as to why it was articulated to begin with, because no matter what you did with it, you couldn't move the leg any further because it was already kind of statically posed. But they just gave you maybe the one joint or one swivel. But the weird thing about that, which I thought in terms of a more aesthetic and artistic sense, is that sometimes the clothes would be exaggerated, and they might already sculpt it out so it would give the appearance of it moving or flowing, such as the headband here. So if a figure like this was designed in the 90s, chances are the artist probably would have taken some liberties and maybe extend this part of his uniform and sculpt it so it'd give the illusion that it's kind of like waving in the wind. Which nowadays I think most toy collectors wouldn't like that because of the articulation, and it would fight what they're kind of creating in terms of a character pose. But I think it was just some way of making action figures look more stylized and a little bit more, heroic or exaggerated, whatever term you're looking for. And especially during those days too, God, they were so heavy on the paints. They'd add all sorts of crazy airbrush details and all sorts of wild things. Not as much as nowadays. The paint application is really good and precise, but it's kind of missing that wild feel that we had way back when people got carried away with stuff like airbrushing and highlighting and adding shadows. Like, it's not enough that some of these figures are sculpted to be really ripped, but back then, they'd go further with the paint application and really emphasize, with paint and inks to create more heavier shadows to really extenuate the muscles and make everything look a little bit more exaggerated than what they were. So that's something I kind of think a figure or character like this would have benefited from if it was designed maybe like 20 years ago. That kind of freedom to design an action figure and be a little bit more liberated with it to really make it look very stylized. Because it's not this toy's fault that the uniforms kind. Let's be honest, this is a very plain looking kind of uniform. It follows a very familiar kind of like, I want to say like pattern or theory that a lot of Marvel costumes share. Now, if you watch a lot, now this is just me being a little bit critical of the designs for like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you look at a lot of their costume designs, everything always kind of feels the same. All the designs kind of like converge and they kind of meet at the chest, and everyone has they share like a similar fine texture, and all the costumes look like they were designed by the same person, which is cool, but in some ways it makes everything look too consistent and too uniform. A good example would be kind of like, you take a look at like Captain Marvel, and she's from outer space, right? And she belongs to that, I don't know, whatever it is, Captain Marvel Corps or whatever. I think that, what is the Kree? And then their uniforms and costumes, they look like the same. Whoever designed it was the same dude that designed Captain America's outfit. It doesn't look as alien as it should. Everything looks so symmetrical. There's very little asymmetry in the costume designs. And it's, I don't know. I'm just being a little bit too critical. I think I'm just running off too too far into this, but I think I'm just expecting or demanding a little bit more, especially with the Marvel Universe being around for over 10 years now. I'd like to see them take some risks in the way they design their characters. Really go. I mean, because the world has accepted the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all the fun movies and characters they've given us, and I think it allows them to open that door and be experimental. Start taking chances with the character design, start taking chances with the costumes. I don't think it's embarrassing to have stuff that looks like it's based off of a comic book. There's even that line in the original X-Men movie by Fox where, Wolverine jokes around about wearing like blue or yellow spandex. But, the truth of the matter is that's the source material. And sometimes I think Hollywood and even comic book creators are embarrassed to present the source material as it is. Everyone wants to like make it grittier or more realistic or stylized. But there's a reason why it appeals to kids and adults that have been fans of the genre for years. So I don't think they should ignore it. And such is the case with this. I don't know what's wrong with portraying Shang-Chi as a martial artist like this than a guy that's in a really nice uniform. Give me a guy that's, has bare feet, a ripped chest, a long headband, and I'm stoked. I'm sold on that. So since we're on the subject of Shang-Chi, I know I'm driving off the rails really hard on this review, and I'm not really talking about the action figure as much as I should. But I want to include some of my history with the character. Where is it? Alright, so me and Shang-Chi, we go way back. And, I mean really way back. So, this is, I think this might have been the first, it's possible this might have been the first comic book I ever had as a child. So this might be my first comic book period. And I didn't really realize that until recently when I dug this out, because I knew I was doing a Shang-Chi review on the action figure, and I'm like, oh, I got that really old Shang-Chi comic. So I pulled it out, and it was full of surprises for me. I think I might have read this once years ago. When I was little, when I was like a little kid, when I say little, maybe like in kindergarten through like the third grade, I never really read the comic books. I'd more so just look at the artwork, because I was just in love with the artwork. And I think that was the case for this. So I'm guessing what the deal was like years ago. And when I say years ago, I mean like years ago. So I didn't realize how old this comic was until I looked at the publication date. And it's dated 1979. So back in September 1979. So I was just a little over 3 years old when this came out. So what I'm guessing is, my mom or dad probably bought this for me, when they were at a 7-Eleven or at a pharmacy or something. Because I loved Spider-Man as a kid. He was one of my favorite superheroes. And then I had, a bunch of Spider-Man toys. And, I had that Spider-Man dune buggy kind of deal that people always kind of want to revisit and draw. I had another Spider-Man. It was maybe like a 12-inch one. And it's kind of like statically posed, but you could like pull out his web shooter. And I think he even had like some sort of weird like telescope or magnifying glass in his eye. So yeah, I was a big fan of Spider-Man when I was a kid. And this comic book, I remember being little and just looking at it. And I knew Batman, I knew Robin, I knew Joker, I knew the Hulk, I knew Spider-Man. But growing up, it's like I always knew who Nick Fury was. And it was because of this comic book. I always knew who Black Widow was because of this comic book. And I always knew who Shang-Chi was because of this comic book. So this was kind of, looking back, this was kind of my gateway into the Marvel Universe at a very, very young age. Even though I didn't really fully understand or appreciate it because I was much too young. And it wasn't until when I was much later and then I was a hardcore comic book collector, I was looking back at this and I'm like, wow, this is some amazing stuff going on in here. Like, for example, it's written by Chris Claremont, who's really well known for defining the X-Men. He's the premier writer of the X-Men. I met him in Las Vegas some years ago, and he's a wonderful gentleman, funny, smart, could tell great stories. And, when we started talking, it was like, for me, the experience of a lifetime. So this is a neat comic book. So it takes place on the SHIELD helicarrier. And then here's Black Widow. And then there's Nick Fury, there's the Silver Samurai, there's Viper. Oh, I love this too. So here's an ad for 100-piece toy soldiers for $1.75. And when I was little, I remember I had my mom actually fill one of these out and mail away for it. And I did get it. And it was like one of the coolest things ever. I remember I kind of still have memories of getting it in the mail and opening it and just having all those Green Army men. Alright, so here's my introduction to Shang-Chi. He's wearing very, very martial arts looking kind of style garb. And I think that's where it gets weird. Because, we live in a very politically correct age, and I wonder if this new design is based, they're trying to be, I don't know, I don't want to open up a whole can of worms talking about politics and stuff, but I wonder if they're trying to be more politically correct in how they portray an Asian character. I'm an Asian American. If you follow me on Instagram, my name's Filipino Spaceman. But I wouldn't find it offensive if Shang-Chi looked like this. I don't think there's anything wrong with representing the culture this character is based off of. I like this look a lot. For me, this is the character I want to see. But then again, I grew up on this version of the character. In today's political climate, I'm not sure how well something like that would be accepted. But growing up mostly my childhood's in the 80s. I grew up on a lot of martial arts films and kung fu films, and of course, a lot of them could be kind of exploitive, but that was just a sign of the times back then. And I don't think there's anything wrong with turning your back on how things were. But I like a costume like this. It's exciting. It really embodies the spirit of what the character is. Yeah, this is a great book. So much going on in it. Yeah, I love the scene here with Viper and Black Widow going at it. Yeah, so you can see, it was just a different time back then. I'm very fortunate I grew up when I did. It's funny, even when I was little, I kind of knew that Black Widow was, she was hot. Here she is, she's wearing a black bodysuit, and it's very form-fitting. It hugs all her curves in the right places. yeah, so great book. Excuse me. All right, so truth be told, I like this comic so much. I actually went on eBay last week and hunted some nicer copies of it down. This is my childhood comic. I'm always gonna love it, but there's a part of me as a collector I would like to have a nicer one, so I hunted those down and got it. So growing up, Shang-Chi, he was one of those visuals. For me, he was a superhero that was very visual. You know, I love this old costume of his. And this version of the character, this is how I'm always going to see Shang-Chi. There's nothing wrong with the new modern design for the films. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I love the trailer. I'm excited for it. So we'll see. We'll see. I know I sound a little critical, and maybe I'm touching into subject matters I necessarily shouldn't address in a comic book review. But, you know, I do have a long history with this character dating back to when I was very young. So, if I feel a little bit more impassioned about it, it's mostly because of that. You know, this was my first comic book as a kid. And these were the first superheroes I was introduced to. So, to wrap things up, Shang-Chi. And, you know, and honestly, the problem can be easily solved. All I have to do is take this head and put it on this body, and I'll be happy. Which I might do. I mean, so, we'll see. So, do I recommend these figures? Of course I do. Of course I do. When the new movie comes out, I'm sure this is going to be another spectacular addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This movie is probably going to make tons of bank. And then once it does, I bet trying to find this figure might be difficult. So, pick it up. This guy's great. I love it. Pick him up for sure. He's a great addition to your comic book inspired shelf of Marvel Legends figures, whereas this one's a great addition to your Marvel Legends. You know, you can stand him next to Cap and Iron Man, and, you know, you have him join the Avengers. You know, this guy can go on his adventures. So yeah, once again, my name is Lou. This video ran very long. I don't know. But once again, I thank you for dropping by and checking out my videos. Like I say all the time, these aren't necessarily the best action figure reviews. If anything, it's more so a chance to allow me to talk about toys, my love for toys, my love for comic books. Relive a little bit of my childhood and just to share that with you. You know, there's some people that can relate to where I'm coming from. And for those of you new to the hobby, you know, it gives you a reason to see like why some of us are so passionate about it. So I hope you have a very wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later. Peace out.